In this video, we're going to be talking about the 1951 classic Hollywood film, A Place in the Sun, which was directed by George Stevens and stars Montgomery Clift, Shelley Winters, and Elizabeth Taylor. We're Coffee with Aliens at the Movies, a film education and film review channel. My name is Robert Bellissimo. I'm an actor and acting teacher.
My name's Steve Chambers. I'm a writer and actor, and we're very happy to welcome our guest, paleontologist and film fan extraordinaire, Jessica Blackwell. Welcome.
Welcome, Jess.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, Steve.
What?
Actually, before that, I almost forgot to suggest to please subscribe to our channel, folks, if you haven't already done so. Just to the bottom right of your screen is the red icon. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time we release a new video or go live. There we go. The spiel's over.
We need that.
Why A Place in the Sun today, Steve, for our classic Hollywood pick?
I really like it. I don't know the short. I'm trying to think of the shorter version. It's one of those films I saw a long time ago and just was really, when I was discovering all the, the cool actors like Brando and Dean and Montgomery Clift. And it wasn't till I was older that I realized, oh, it's a classic. I just really liked it. And I like how it moves. And to me, every time I've watched it, until maybe last night, because now I'm looking at it with critical eyes, but it was really neat that it sort of shifted genres 3 times. To me, it's sort of about just this sort of class struggle, and this guy just wants to move ahead like any good American post World War II. And then it's about, well, love and oh, I like her, but oh, and then it turns into almost like a courtroom. Well, it is courtroom drama, and we don't exactly know what he did. And there's a line from I don't know if it's the defense attorney, it is, I think, who asks, I forget how he said it, but it's sort of like, he might have had the idea to do it, but is that a crime, or is it the deed? Right. Did he do it? And I know this stuck in my head too, and I shouldn't be reading what other people say. And I didn't read a criticism of the film, but I know, it might even be on the DVD case, that's why I know this, is Charlie Chaplin called it the greatest movie made about America. The greatest movie about America ever made. And I was, and the only thing I could think of is like, well, it's that striving to get ahead. It's the American dream. And that is sort of this guy's, George Eastman, played by Montgomery Clift. His whole thing is he's kind of bounced around. Now he's related to a bigwig, and he wants to move ahead and fast track as quick as he can. And anyway, and I'll wrap it up here. But I just wonder, I think you could look at it and say, that's his attraction to Liz Taylor. She represents power. She represents this. And so he will ditch his equal, played by Shelley Winters, the dowdy girl, for the upper class. Yeah, okay. Or is he ditching, not that it's okay, blah, 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 but is it that he's legitimately just attracted to the Liz Taylor character, even if she were an equal? What if Liz Taylor also worked in the factory with him? Would he be like, nah? Or is it, because I think what Chaplin might be saying is, part of it is, no, he's chasing the dream and she embodies the dream, which, like, okay, cinematically she does, but if we're looking just like raw at the story, I think he's really in love with her. I don't think that has to do with the American
I think that's
dream.
what they're communicating for sure. And I think so. Yeah.
But I like it.
It marries in both worlds in terms of, yes, you're right. Everything you say, Steve, I totally agree with. She represents the American dream, climbing up the ladder. She's rich, she's beautiful. And, Shelley Winters, even though he likes her, he's attracted to her, but she's the equal. Like, she works in the factory with him and she's not going to go up. So therefore, I'm not going to get anywhere with you. Therefore, I'm going to go this way. But I think George Stevens was really communicating that this really was 2 people truly in love. Have you seen it before, Jess, or this was your first time seeing it? What did you think?
This was my first time seeing it. I thought it was an interesting film. I am not so sure that it's, true love, but I also think making a judgment on that would require that we define what true love is and how it differs from
Mm-hmm.
other forms of attraction. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for me, I think a big part of what this movie highlights is, well, I mean, I guess the shorter version would be, had it not been for the arbitrary rules that we encounter, maybe they're not arbitrary, but for example, the workplace, you can't date your coworkers. So if
Yeah, that was one of the
he
rules. Yeah.
had been able to have a public relationship, would things have played out differently? Would he have had the wandering eye?
Oh.
Would he still have felt that attraction for Liz Taylor's character? Is it, in part at least, that he became frustrated by the fact that he couldn't take his relationship, to the next level? You sort of lose interest when it's like, oh, well, if this is all we can do, like sort of see each other in secret. After a while, it loses its novelty, it loses its excitement.
Yeah.
But
those rules were a big part of it, because if they knew about the relationship, then he would have lost his job. Even if there was no Liz Taylor, he would have had to have stuck around, because they had those tight rules. So, yeah.
And I mean, another big takeaway here is, not having access to safe, legal, affordable abortion sort of this entire plot. So, I think this film is especially timely because, as we've seen, this is still an ongoing issue in the world. This is still an ongoing issue in the States. And I don't want to try to make this political, but it seems difficult to watch this movie and not give consideration to the role that, some of these beliefs about women having safe, affordable access to abortion. I thought of that too, but I also wondered if she actually even wanted to have an abortion. I wondered if Clift was pushing her, forcing her to do it, and so she was. And we see that all the time. A man gets a woman pregnant, and tries to force a woman to have an abortion because he doesn't want the child. So I wasn't so sure if she actually wanted to have an abortion or not. You don't really know. It's up to the audience. Later on the boat, she even says to him, well, I don't mind being poor. We just have each other. We'll be happy. And, I just, you don't really know how she really felt about it. Is she just going along for the ride? Because she.
You know what? You might have just answered something for me there, both of you. But like that moment in the boat when he did or did not kill her, whatever he did, he didn't save her, he killed her, whatever. But when she's like, hey, what you just said, Robert, like, I don't mind being poor, I don't mind. That's the moment where that hit him more than anything. I think it's,
you see the way he reacts. Yeah.
It's less about, I got to be with her. It's, oh, my life will be poor. And in that, maybe it does say that Liz Taylor is more about money than just love. And I agree with Jess's thing. I mean, I don't even know that we can talk about that without defining true love, because I don't know true love. You're right. Like, come to think of it, the way he meets her, everything about her, like, I don't think, put it this way, I feel that maybe consciously he thinks, no, I really love her. But does he? Because the way he meets her, she walks into this house he doesn't feel he belongs in. She's not dressed right. He's not in a tuxedo. Everyone's in a tuxedo. She's in a beautiful white gown. And so the way he meets her, it's set up. He's set up to, of course he's going to fall in love with her. And so to answer my own question, like if she were just another dowdy factory worker, I don't know. Maybe she is really indicative of his climb, right? And we kind of touch on that with the mother, and when he looks at the street not preachers, whatever, the kids singing on the street, and he says that to Liz Taylor's dad, like, listen, I was raised poor, and this is what I did, and then until the authorities came and took me to school. So they've set up like, I'm done with that. I need what you have.
Yeah.
And so maybe I don't know, then maybe he doesn't even know what love is. Like, he's just so in his own thing.
Well, he's a young guy, right? And she, he's in his late 20s, and she's, 10 years younger, or she's like in high school. Like she goes away to school towards the end, right? And Liz Taylor, this was actually shot in 1949. I don't know if you read this. So she's only 17 for real, and Clift is 29.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't. Is this total naivety, or is it's really up to the audience? But just on an emotional level, like I've seen this film at least a few times. I mean, I have it here. I know I see you have it as well, Steve. And oh my God, I found it just in a good way unbearable. Like, it was hitting me so hard because you see, I don't know how to feel about this guy. Like he's, this is a testament to Clift, how good of an actor he is that he can make you sympathize with this guy who you don't even know really killed this woman or not. But just the situation he gets in, he meets this woman, and then he gets her pregnant when he was about to leave her, and he's being welcomed into this family, but now he's being pulled back. But then you feel sorry for Shelley Winters too. You think, look what this asshole's doing to her, right? Like he got her pregnant. He's like basically treating her like crap. He's lying to her about where he is. Meanwhile, he's basically cheats on her. He didn't break it off with her, right? He goes off with Elizabeth Taylor. And even in the end, I mean, he's lied a lot in the film. So why should we necessarily believe he didn't do it? And they get him on first degree, right? They get him on because there was a blow to the head. They get that he must have hit her. And even if you watch the way he answers when at the end, when the guy who's putting him in jail, dramatically, like, you hit her over the head with the what do you call that thing?
A noir.
Yeah, and he said, did you do it? He just says no, very softly, not like no, God. It's very soft, but even when he talks to lawyers, he's very genuine, Clift. He's very convicted, but in a subtle way. So I don't know. I mean, did he actually do it, or he believes he didn't do it because he can't face the fact that he could have done it or even thought? It's really complex, but I just found the whole thing unbearable. I'm with him 1 minute. I'm like, man, you got to get out of this. You got to get out of it. You want him to get away with murder practically. And then I'm judging him like, oh my God, you are just, look, man, I know you're a good guy, but you've made, I know you didn't mean for this to happen, but shit, I don't know what to tell you, like this, I get it. I get what you're doing, but it's not good. So that was my experience. Like it is so, and even that last scene, God, where Liz Taylor comes to say goodbye to him. And sometimes I'm like, well, maybe you should have just came up. Maybe you should have just told everyone what was going on. Maybe, I understand why he didn't. The family already didn't, were already wary of him because he was poor.
Jess, you brought that up yesterday.
Something
like, if he just told Liz Taylor, would that have...
That's what and I can understand why he wouldn't have. Because he probably thought, not a chance. If I tell her I got someone pregnant, no one got divorced back then. This is the 40s, right? So, I mean, what would they have thought? This guy had a lot. He already had, in their eyes, baggage. He didn't really have baggage, but, just because he's poor. But of course, they're the represent the rich snobs. And, and I'm just thinking, I can understand why he would have thought he didn't have a chance. However, because she comes back at the end and she says she still loves him, whether she's naive or not. That's how she feels at that moment, right? And now, from her point of view, he might have killed her, So it's interesting. It really leaves a lot to think about. But go on, Jess. You had a point about Steve mentioned. You had something you brought up.
No, sort of just a similar, open, honest communication. Obviously would have helped these characters work through these problems. But the issue at stake here is that these very, very young people were not in a position where they could communicate honestly. And I think the notion that love is something that ought to be permanent and eternal is also problematic. I think this film helps to highlight that because, a part of it is perhaps we ought to define what love is and how that's different from infatuation or intimacy.
Yeah.
Also, in doing that, I think we should consider the possibility that love isn't necessarily always permanent or eternal, and that it's okay.
Or cut and dry.
Yeah,
Hollywood makes it always seem cut and dry, and I think this film really shows it's not.
Right, and I think it's okay to love someone and then to fall out of love with them, and it's okay to love someone and still think they're an okay person, but to love somebody else or to love somebody else more or differently, and you know, you raised the point earlier that, you know, perhaps George was pressuring his girlfriend into having an abortion. And yeah, there's probably some of that going on. But also, I don't know that she could know what she wants, because either way, you know, your options are, if you're lucky, you find some doctor or some person who's willing to help you terminate this pregnancy. And there are all sorts of medical risks that come with that. And then also, you'll probably lose your boyfriend, and you'll have to live with the shame and guilt in, you know, still quite religious America.
Yeah.
And, you know, other option is marry this man who you know isn't in love with you anymore, and who you know doesn't want to be with you, and hope that you can make it work, because that's the right thing to do. And, you know, does she even know if she really loves him? Is it more so just, you know,
yeah, that's true.
It's easier to love him because then at least you're doing the morally right thing. If you love
yes.
him, okay.
And she's only 22, right? Like,
that's
she's
right.
very
Yes.
young.
And then, you know, your other option is to go home to your parents and be an unwed mother and be
it's
shamed.
Unbearable, man. It's unbearable.
So
this movie killed me.
It is. It's an impossible situation. And for George, I wonder, I feel like when I was growing up, I was raised in, I mean, a mixed family in terms of religion, but I attended a Catholic school, and, you know, one side of my family was quite religious. And at some point, I do remember hearing that sort of idea that you've committed a sin or a crime as soon as you've thought about doing it. Like, as soon as you have that ill intent, you might as well have done it. And I think we maybe see some of that here. George, you know, there's also a legal situation here. You know, he had the intent, it was evidently premeditated. He was initially going to commit this crime, that the crime sort of happened to occur after he set it up, even though he may have changed his mind. Like, that's a legal conundrum. Like, was he under the terms of the law, you know, was it appropriate to sentence him to first degree murder and to death? But then also there is this question of, at what point in the process do we say somebody has committed an offense, like a moral offense? So, you know, and you hear this a lot of guilt, right? Like, oh, well, I thought about having an affair. I was fantasizing about my friend, and I was really considering having the affair, but I didn't. And for some people, it's like, and that I didn't means I'm okay. I've been faithful. But for other people, it's like, well, no, once you got to that point of like seriously considering it, like, you've already been unfaithful. And
and he was, right? I mean, he did. And he also came from a very religious family. I mean, the reason they were poor is because they dedicated themselves, as he says to Elizabeth Taylor's father, my parents dedicated themselves to their religious callings, right? So, you know, it's interesting that, I mean, I think that played a role in how he was so torn. I mean, it wasn't just he was a bloody, vengeful guy who had a killer instinct, right? Like, I think he really was, you know, his instincts were saying one thing, but his morals and humanity were saying another.
Well, I don't know. So, I think the main thing I see in George is not so much, like, in terms of the main difference between his very religious family and George himself, it seems to me that the difference, there's a material difference in that, you know, his family is very poor and he's on his way to not being poor, and that they're very religious in a traditional Christian way, and perhaps he isn't, as we can see by his, you know, difference in sexual and social morals and his willingness to commit murder. But also, his family is oriented towards doing good for others. Their primary, it seems that his family has a lack of desire. They're just desiring differently. They have dedicated themselves to pursuing a goal and pursuing it rigorously. But their goal is to spread good to others through their religious mission. Whereas George has dedicated himself
to himself.
To pursuing, you know, whatever he desires in that moment, to accumulating wealth, to accumulating good feelings. And for me, that is, you know, in terms of describing America as godless, I don't think we can necessarily take that literally as in like, oh, you've lost sight of Jesus Christ. Maybe that's the case, and that's maybe a good thing, who knows. But I think a country does become godless when it stops caring about other people. Like as soon as you start pursuing only your immediate interests, you know, especially to the detriment of everyone else around you, I think you're behaving in a godless way, in a morally reprehensible and ill-informed way. And I think George illustrates that beautifully, because he also, we don't see him thinking about what's best for Liz Taylor either.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is having a lover who has committed murder and who has lied and deceived, like, is this in her best interest? Is it in his family's best interest? Is it in Liz Taylor's family's best interest? It serves nobody but himself. And you know, even then we saw it didn't ultimately serve him. He lost everything. And
you could see how it's interesting. Steve and I have found that when you Google this, it pops up as a noir. And I thought, how is this a film noir? But you can see how it is kind of noirish. Like, again, the pursuit of money, the attraction to wealth, the doomed character.
Well, your protagonist, you know, you asked earlier, like, I don't know what side to take with him. But I think that it, just by virtue of us doing everything, watching everything through George's Montgomery Clift's eyes, you are him. So you're less, I feel that it's more subjective, like it's purposely harder for you to judge because you're not watching it over here. Honestly, it wasn't until yesterday, and I've seen this
it's from his POV,
5 times where I purposely, like I really tried to distance myself and just like watch it as though I were, you know, just, I don't, whatever, a space monkey looking down on Earth. And I'm like, oh yeah, I see what you're gonna do. Okay, all right. But I mean, the way the film to me is designed, you know, for your first viewing is you don't really think about that until it's too late.
True.
Like you are George, and you're like, oh Jesus, what have I done? Because when he's on the boat with Winters, you are like, we know what you're gonna do or what you want to do, but and I'm kind of with him, like, oh, don't do it. And there is something when she's like, it's okay, do you love me? She reminds me of like in The Kids in the Hall, the guys who are, nobody likes us. And I get it, I'm not making fun of her, but that is, they're trying to show us how he's hearing it. It's just like, oh, for fuck, I can be poor. Are you kidding? What do you think ran away from, man?
He really snaps when she says that, which I thought was interesting.
Yes, but not to defend him. I'm just saying, I think it's told. I don't think the director's supposed to. I don't think he's putting you in a position to judge him. Purposely, he's making it. You're just him, and it really isn't. So you talk about it after the fact. Where I'm like, you know, and I said to Robert too, I'm like, oh man, when I first, he was just so cool. It's Montgomery Clift, he's cool. Because I was watching it for like his style. Like I was like, you know, 13, he was just cool. And, you know, every time I watch it, this is the first time I've seen it in 10 years, maybe more. And I'm like, oh yeah, all right. Well, you're an asshole, but it's good casting. I just want to talk about cast because I do maintain image says a lot. And if you cast even Marlon Brando, or it would be easy with a lot of other actors who play it beautifully, play it real, to be like, you're an asshole. And this guy, Montgomery Clift, in all his films, and not to say he's one note, he's a very good actor, but there's always this boyish, and I want to touch on this, exactly sensitivity, this help me, which my last point too is with the Liz Taylor, I keep coming back to that, I know, but like, is it true love, whatever the hell that is, or is it a business move? But I think what it kind of also is on an emotional level, and she says it, come to mama. That's his only kind of real connection with a woman's been his mother. It obviously affects him. He's got to talk to her on the phone. It's all yes,
and he talks to her like a kid too.
It's like, well, it's like Elvis and his mom. And when he looks at the street, the kids on the street with the prayer group, and and I don't know if he's looking at it like, oh God, that's awful, or oh, home, or whatever. But also, and then when he's with Taylor, look at how it's shot. Like I couldn't help but notice, it's usually her face is on camera and it's his back when they're close. And he always kind of tucks into her, like when they're in the car, he comes into her. She does the like kind of historically masculine, more protective, I'll say protective thing when she hugs him. He's always the wounded bird. And again, not to make an excuse, but I'm saying part of the attraction to her may not just be about career advancement, life advancement, or just about pure lust or love. It is also, I need someone to take care of me, because he said it at 13, he struck out on his own. And I don't know how old the character is supposed to be, let's say 20s, whatever.
20s, yeah.
But he's at least 10 years of no, I think, connection really with a woman, and the only one he knows thus far is a mother. And I just wonder, it just hit me now, because we were joking about it when she says, "You come to mama," says Liz Taylor, and you're like, yeah, all right. But he was like into that, right? I don't mean in a sick whatever way, but like in a comfortable way. It was like a blanket. She's a blanket to him. Either way, it's all selfish.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think that's a good point with the mama. Yeah, because he is that guy who needs to be taken care of, and it's true. I mean, it really required an actor who you could get on his side even through all these acts that he's doing. And I think Clift is like a wounded. You're right. I mean, he brings such vulnerability, and so like you really feel for him. I think at that time, I think Brando could have pulled that off too. I mean, he does that with Stanley, right? With like, he's like, how else can you empathize with Stanley Kowalski other than through an actor who can make you do that? And those were the actors of the day, right? So I thought, yeah, I mean, without Clift, without a really good actor to make you feel for a guy who's, whether he's a murderer or not, or a murderer in his heart at the least, it needed a really, really great actor. But everyone's great. I mean, Liz Taylor, even Shelley Winters, even when she's like, "You're gonna marry me tomorrow," and she goes back, "I'm here. I'm at the bus stop. You come." And like she's like, she's almost scary, you know? Yeah, she's really effective. And it's interesting when he brings her on Labor Day, and I thought, I wonder if he knew it was Labor Day, because he was gonna do it almost to trick her, like to put it off a little longer. And he's like, "Well, I didn't know." So how was I supposed to know that they weren't going to be here or whatever? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a fascinating film, and I can see, you're right, it really requires repeat viewing, Steve, because I never saw a lot of these things that we're discussing. When I first saw it, I was always just with the guy because it's through his POV.
Well, you're a guy, he's a guy. You're young, he's young. At least for me.
But the way it was communicated as well, the way it's told is really, like at the end when he's going to the electric chair, the last shot is him thinking of her, of Elizabeth Taylor, right? So it really is told from his perspective of love, and I was innocent, and yes, I wanted to kill her, but I didn't do it. And I don't think the audience really questions that until they see it again, until you can remove yourself from it. So when I watched it again the other night, I haven't seen it in probably over 6 years, and it's a much more complex and ambiguous film than I remembered. So I love it. And I know Steve and I both showed our DVD, and I know it's also on archive.org, the free internet streaming library service.
And you can rent it on like Cineplex and YouTube and stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you so much. Great choice, Steve, because I love this film, and I'm glad we did this review and to see it again. Jess, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. I liked your insights. And thank you everyone for watching. Again, if this is your first time here, or if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to our channel by clicking on the Coffee with Aliens logo floating above my head here to your top left, and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time we release a new video or go live. Thank you again. See you next time.